The fluorescent lights of Boston Logan International Airport cast a harsh glow over the sea of travelers rushing in every direction. Among them, Sarah Mitchell navigated her way through Terminal E, her blue scrubs partially hidden beneath her worn jacket. At 26, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned early on that life rarely offered second chances. Flight 253 to Chicago is now boarding at Gate 17, the announcement echoed through the terminal, barely audible over the cacophony of rolling suitcases and hurried conversations. Sarah checked her watch. She had 30 minutes before her shift at Massachusetts General Hospital. Working as an ER nurse while taking night courses to complete her advanced nursing degree had become her routine, a carefully calculated path toward the better life she envisioned for herself and her mother. "Just a few more months," she whispered, to herself, a mantra that had sustained her through double shifts and midnight study sessions. The scholarship to Northwestern's prestigious nursing program in Chicago would change everything, if she could just hold on a little longer. As she made her way toward the exit, her trained eye caught sight of an elderly woman struggling with her luggage near the international arrivals gate. The woman, elegantly dressed in a tailored navy suit despite her apparent exhaustion, leaned heavily on a carved wooden cane. Her silver hair was swept into an immaculate chignon, and her luggage, a collection of fine leather pieces, was adorned with stickers from destinations around the world. Something about the woman's dignified struggle made Sarah pause. She was already running late, but the nurse in her couldn't ignore someone in need. "Excuse me, ma'am," Sarah approached with a gentle smile. "Would you like some help with your bags?" The woman looked up, revealing striking blue eyes that seemed to assess Sarah in one comprehensive glance. "That's very kind of you, dear. I seem to have misplaced my driver. The flight from Zurich was delayed, and I'm afraid I'm quite turned around." Her voice carried the cultured tone of old New England money, the kind Sarah had encountered often. Enough working at the hospital, but rarely in her own neighborhood in Dorchester. "I'd be happy to help you find your way or call someone for you," Sarah offered, taking the handle of the heaviest suitcase. "I'm Sarah, by the way. Sarah Mitchell." "Eleanor." "Blackwood," the woman replied with a grateful nod. "I was supposed to have a car waiting, but after that dreadful flight delay, I suspect they've given up on me." Sarah glanced again at her watch. Her shift started in 20 minutes, but the hospital was only a 10-minute walk away. "Let me help." "You get a cab, Mrs. Blackwood. It shouldn't take long." "That would be wonderful, dear, and please call me Eleanor." The older woman's face softened with relief. It's refreshing to encounter genuine kindness these days. Most people are too busy looking at their phones to notice an old woman struggling. As they made their way toward the taxi stand, Eleanor asked, "Do you work at a hospital, Sarah? I notice your uniform." "Yes, I'm an ER nurse at Mass General. Been there for 3 years now," Sarah replied, maneuvering the luggage through the crowded terminal. "A noble profession. My late husband was a surgeon. Quite a brilliant one, though I might be biased." Eleanor smiled, revealing the hint of a dimple in her right cheek. "And what brings you to the airport today?" "Surely not. Just to rescue distressed elderly ladies," Sarah laughed. "Actually, I was just checking the departures board. I've been accepted to a specialized nursing program in Chicago. It starts next month, and I'm trying to figure out the logistics." Chicago, a fine city, though the winters are brutal. "My son has extensive business interests there," Eleanor commented. "Which program, if you don't mind my asking?" "Northwestern. They offered me a scholarship, which is the only way I could possibly afford it," Sarah explained, a hint of pride in her voice. "Northwestern has an excellent reputation. My grandson completed his MBA there." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "You must be quite talented to have earned a scholarship." They reached the taxi stand, where Sarah helped arrange Eleanor's luggage and made sure the driver understood the Beacon Hill address Eleanor provided. "Thank you, Sarah. You've been extraordinarily helpful," Eleanor said, taking Sarah's hand in both of hers. The older woman's fingers were adorned with a single platinum band and an emerald ring that caught the light. "I wish there was some way to repay your kindness." "No need for that," Sarah assured her. "I'm just glad I could help." Eleanor studied her face for a moment. then reached into her handbag and extracted a business card. "Nevertheless, I'd like you to have this. My son's company is always looking for exceptional healthcare professionals. Perhaps there might be an opportunity that aligns with your ambitions." Sarah accepted the card out of politeness, tucking it into her pocket without looking at it. "That's very kind of you." "Kindness begets kindness, my dear," Eleanor said as she settled into the taxi. "I have a feeling we'll meet again." With a final wave, the taxi pulled away, leaving Sarah to rush to her shift, the encounter already fading from her immediate concerns as she mentally prepared for the 12 hours of emergencies and chaos that awaited her. The card remained forgotten in her pocket through her shift, through the subway ride home to the modest apartment she shared with her mother in Dorchester, and through the quiet dinner of reheated pasta, while her mother recounted stories from her day at the elementary school where she worked as a teaching assistant. It wasn't until later that night, as Sarah emptied her pockets before doing laundry, that she rediscovered Eleanor's card. In the quiet of her small bedroom, she finally examined it. Blackwood Medical Innovations. Alexander Blackwood, CEO advancing healthcare through technology. Below the elegant embossing was a Boston phone number and an email address. Sarah turned the card over to find a handwritten note in elegant script. "Call my office directly. Eleanor Blackwood." Sarah set the card on her nightstand, dismissing it as a polite but ultimately meaningless gesture. Her path was set. Finish. Her current rotation at Mass General, move to Chicago for the specialized program, and return with credentials that would secure her future. A random encounter with a wealthy woman at the airport wasn't going to change that trajectory. 2 weeks later, Sarah's carefully constructed plans began to unravel. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning as she was preparing for her shift, the VAI. Northwestern scholarship had been unexpectedly rescinded due to budget cuts. The program offered her deferred admission, but without financial assistance, it might as well have been on the moon. "There has to be some mistake," Sarah said aloud to her empty apartment, rereading the email for the 4th time. Her mother had already left for work, sparing Sarah from having to explain yet another setback. She sank onto the edge of her bed, the familiar weight of disappointment settling over her. This wasn't the first time life had pulled the rug from under her feet, but the fall seemed harder each time. Chicago had represented not just advanced education, but escape from the grinding routine, from the memories of her father's abandonment, from the constant worry about making ends meet. Her gaze fell on her nightstand, where Eleanor's business card still sat. Sarah picked it up, turning it over in her fingers. What were the chances that a company specializing in medical innovations would have any interest in an ER nurse with an associate's degree? Slim to none, she guessed. And yet, as she prepared for her shift, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that perhaps this was one of those moments, the kind her mother always talked about, when the universe offered an unexpected door just as another closed. By the time her lunch break came around, Sarah had convinced herself to at least make the call. The worst they could say was no, and she was already well acquainted with rejection. "Blackwood Medical Innovations, how may I direct your call?" a polished voice answered. My name is Sarah Mitchell," she began, suddenly feeling foolish. "Eleanor Blackwood gave me this number a couple of weeks ago. I helped her at the airport and she—" "Miss Mitchell," the receptionist interrupted, her tone warming considerably. "Mrs. Blackwood left specific instructions for when you might call. Please hold while I connect you to her son's office." Before Sarah could protest, the line switched to classical music. Less than a minute later, a deep male voice came through. "Ms. Mitchell, I've been expecting your call. Alexander Blackwood here." Sarah swallowed hard, unprepared for the direct connection to the CEO. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry to bother you. Your mother gave me her card when I helped her at the airport, but I don't want to waste your time." "My mother rarely misjudges character, Ms. Mitchell," he interrupted, his voice carrying the same cultured tones as Eleanor's, though with an edge of something harder, less approachable. "She speaks quite highly of you. As it happens, we're launching a new patient care initiative and are looking for someone with your background. Would you be available for an interview this Friday at our offices?" Sarah blinked in surprise. This Friday? Yes, I can make that work. Excellent. My assistant will email you the details. We look forward to meeting you properly. The call ended before Sarah could respond, leaving her staring at her phone in disbelief. What had just happened? And more importantly, what was she getting herself into? 3 days later, Sarah stood in the gleaming lobby of the Blackwood building in downtown Boston, her simple navy dress and jacket, the nicest outfit she owned, feeling woefully inadequate amid the marble floors and modern art installations. The receptionist directed her to the executive elevator, which whisked her to the top floor without stopping. "Ms. Mitchell," a tall woman in an impeccable pantsuit greeted her as the doors opened. "I'm Vivian, Mr. Blackwood's assistant. Please follow me." She led Sarah through a series of corridors to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. 3 people were already seated at the polished table: a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses, a younger woman with a tablet, and at the head of the table a man whose presence commanded attention without effort. Alexander Blackwood rose as Sarah entered. In his early 40s, he had the lean, athletic build of someone who made time for physical fitness despite a demanding schedule. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his eyes, the same striking blue as his mother's, assessed Sarah with cool efficiency. "Ms. Mitchell," he extended his hand, his grip firm and brief. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." As Sarah settled into the chair indicated, she couldn't help but notice the contrast between mother and son. Where Eleanor had exuded warmth and graciousness, Alexander radiated a controlled intensity that made her instinctively straighten her posture. "I understand you're currently working in emergency medicine at Massachusetts General," he began, glancing at a file before him, "and pursuing additional certifications." "Yes, that's correct," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been at Mass General for 3 years now, primarily in trauma response." Alexander nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "And you were planning to continue your education in Chicago, I believe?" Sarah hesitated. "That was the plan, yes, but circumstances have changed." Something flickered in his eyes, interest perhaps, or simple acknowledgement. "Circumstances have a way of doing that," he said, his tone neutral. "Let me tell you why you're here, Miss Mitchell." He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the table. Blackwood Medical is launching a pilot program focused on personalized home healthcare for patients with complex needs. It combines advanced monitoring technology with skilled human care, an area where automation falls short. We're looking for someone to oversee the first phase of this program, working directly with a single patient to establish protocols before we expand. Sarah's professional interest was piqued, despite her reservations. "That sounds innovative. May I ask who the patient would be?" Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "My mother." Understanding dawned on Sarah. This wasn't a random job opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated introduction. "Eleanor has been diagnosed with a rare form of arrhythmia," he continued, his voice betraying no emotion. "Her condition requires consistent monitoring and care, but she refuses to remain in a hospital setting. She's selective about who she allows into her home." "And she selected me," Sarah stated, realization settling in, "based on a 10-minute interaction at an airport." The corner of Alexander's mouth quirked slightly, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of the absurdity. "My mother has always trusted her instincts about people. Thus far, her track record is impressive." The other executives shared a knowing look that Sarah couldn't quite interpret. "The position would require you to live at the Blackwood estate in Beacon Hill," Alexander continued. "You would have your own suite of rooms, of course, and 2 days off per week. The salary is substantially above market rate, reflecting both the unique nature of the position and the confidentiality it requires." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, Sarah found a detailed job description and a compensation package that made her breath catch. The figure was more than triple her current salary. "This is generous," she managed, her mind racing. With this kind of money, she could pay off her student loans, help her mother, and still save for future education. "We value excellence, Ms. Mitchell," Alexander replied simply. The question is whether this aligns with your career goals." Sarah looked up from the paperwork to find his intense gaze fixed on her, awaiting her answer. In that moment, she sensed that this decision would alter the course of her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. "When would you need an answer?" she asked. "Now," he said without hesitation. "If you accept, you'd begin next Monday." Sarah took a deep breath. Chicago had been her dream, her escape plan, but perhaps this was the universe offering an unexpected alternative, a different door to the future she sought. "I accept," she said firmly, meeting Alexander's gaze with newfound determination. Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps, or approval. He extended his hand once more. "Welcome to Blackwood Medical Innovations, Ms. Mitchell." As their hands met, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped onto a path that would lead her places she never anticipated, for better or worse. The Blackwood estate stood like an elegant sentinel on Beacon Hill, its red brick facade and black shutters exuding old-world dignity among Boston's historic architecture. As the town car pulled through the wrought iron gates, Sarah gazed at the manicured gardens and stone fountain, reality sinking in. This would be her home for the foreseeable future. The main house dates back to 1821, the driver informed her, catching her wide-eyed expression in the rearview mirror. "The Blackwoods have owned it for 4 generations now." Sarah nodded, clutching her single suitcase closer. Everything she valued enough to bring fit inside one bag, a stark contrast to the grandeur surrounding her. The car circled the driveway and stopped at the front entrance where a woman in a simple grey dress waited on the steps. "Miss Mitchell," the woman greeted her with a crisp nod. "I'm Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper. I'll show you to your quarters and then to Mrs. Blackwood." Sarah followed, taking in the soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that likely cost more than her entire education. The house was immaculate, yet somehow still felt lived in, with fresh flowers arranged in antique vases and books left open on side tables. "Your suite is here, in the east wing," Mrs. Reynolds explained, opening a door to reveal a sitting room that led to a bedroom and private bathroom. Mrs. Blackwood thought you might appreciate the morning light. The suite was larger than Sarah's entire apartment in Dorchester, decorated in soothing blues and creams, with windows overlooking the garden. A desk in the corner held a sleek laptop and a folder labeled Patient Care Protocols. "This is beautiful," Sarah managed, setting down her suitcase. "Mrs. Blackwood selected the furnishings herself," Mrs. Reynolds replied, her expression softening slightly. "She's been quite looking forward to your arrival. I'll give you 30 minutes to settle in, then escort you to her rooms." Alone, Sarah took a moment to absorb her new reality. Just a week ago, she'd been devastated by the loss of her scholarship. Now she stood in a mansion, employed at a salary that seemed almost fictional. The speed of the change left her dizzy. She unpacked quickly, hanging her modest wardrobe in the walk-in closet that could have accommodated 10 times as many clothes. After a quick shower in the marble bathroom, she changed into fresh scrubs, her uniform, until she understood the expectations better, and reviewed the medical information in the folder. Eleanor's condition was indeed complex. A rare arrhythmia complicated by an autoimmune disorder that made traditional treatments challenging. She required monitoring, medication management, and potentially emergency intervention if her condition deteriorated. The protocols were thorough, developed by top cardiologists, yet allowed for the dignity and independence Eleanor clearly valued. A gentle knock announced Mrs. Reynolds' return. "Mrs. Blackwood is ready to see you now." They traversed the main house, passing a grand staircase and library before reaching the west wing. Mrs. Reynolds knocked on a polished mahogany door before opening it to reveal a sun-filled sitting room where Eleanor Blackwood reclined on a chaise lounge, a book open on her lap. "Sarah, my dear." Eleanor's face brightened. "How wonderful to see you again." "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. That will be all for now." The housekeeper withdrew silently, closing the door behind her. "I'm so pleased you accepted our offer," Eleanor continued, gesturing for Sarah to take the armchair beside her. "Though I admit I was quite confident you would." "It was an unexpected opportunity," Sarah replied carefully, and very generous." Eleanor waved away the comment. "Alexander never underpays for value. It's one of his better business principles." She studied Sarah with those perceptive blue eyes. "You've had a chance to review my medical situation." "Yes, I have some questions about your current medication schedule and monitoring procedures, if you don't mind." "Straight to business. I appreciate that. Ask away." For the next hour, they discussed Eleanor's health regimen. The elderly woman was remarkably knowledgeable about her condition and forthcoming about her symptoms, making Sarah's job easier. As their conversation wound down, Eleanor shifted to more personal topics. "Tell me, have you met my son properly yet, beyond that dreadfully formal interview?" "No, not really," Sarah admitted. "He seemed intense." Eleanor laughed, a melodic sound that briefly transformed her into a much younger woman. An apt description. "Alexander carries the weight of the Blackwood legacy. Seriously, perhaps too seriously at times," she sighed. "He wasn't always so contained. Grief changes people, sometimes irrevocably." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the door opened and Alexander Blackwood himself entered. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His tie loosened slightly in what appeared to be his only concession to relaxation. "Mother," he greeted Eleanor with a kiss on her cheek, before turning to Sarah with a slight nod. "Miss Mitchell, I trust your arrival has been smooth." "Yes, thank you," Sarah replied, rising from her chair. "Your mother and I were just reviewing her care protocols." "Excellent." His gaze flickered between them. "I hope she hasn't been overwhelming you with too many family stories yet." "On the contrary," Eleanor protested mildly. "I was just telling Sarah what a delightful child you were before you decided that smiling might damage your corporate reputation." Flash of something, embarrassment, irritation, crossed Alexander's face before his expression resumed its usual inscrutable calm. "I have meetings until late tonight, but Vivian has arranged for us to review the monitoring technology tomorrow, morning at 9. Will that work with your schedule, Miss Mitchell?" The formality of his address contrasted sharply with Eleanor's warmth. "That's fine, Mr. Blackwood. I'll be ready." "Good. Mother, don't exhaust yourself." With another brief nod to Sarah, he departed as abruptly as he had arrived. Eleanor shook her head fondly. "You'll have to forgive Alexander's manner. He takes some getting used to." "He seems very devoted to you," Sarah observed diplomatically. "Yes, though he'd be mortified to hear it described that way." Eleanor's expression grew pensive. "After we lost Rebecca and Emily, Alexander threw himself into work. It's been his refuge and his prison these past 5 years." Sarah hesitated, unsure if she should inquire further, but her curiosity won out. "Rebecca and Emily?" "His wife and daughter," Eleanor replied softly. "Car accident. Rebecca died instantly. Emily was only 4. She lingered for 3 days in the ICU before her little body gave out. She looked away toward the garden visible through the French doors. Alexander hasn't been the same since. He closed himself off, as if feeling nothing at all were better than feeling that pain again." "I'm so sorry," Sarah murmured, her heart aching for the losses this family had endured. "It's why this heart condition of mine worries him so much," Eleanor continued. "He's terrified of losing anyone else he loves. Hence you, the best care money can buy, right here at home where he can keep an eye on everything." The conversation left Sarah with a new perspective on her taciturn employer. Behind his cool exterior lay a man shaped by unimaginable tragedy, a father and husband who had lost everything in a single moment. It explained much about his intensity, his control, his distance. The days fell into a routine. Sarah monitored Eleanor's vital signs, managed her medications, and accompanied her on gentle walks through the garden. The elderly woman proved to be a delightful companion, witty, well-read, and full of stories about her travels around the world with her late husband. Alexander remained an enigma, appearing briefly at breakfast before disappearing to his offices, downtown returning late in the evenings to have dinner with his mother and then retreat to his study. When their paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite but distant, asking for medical updates with clinical detachment. 2 weeks into her new position, Sarah was reviewing Eleanor's cardiac readings when Alexander found her in the small medical office adjacent to his mother's suite. "How is she doing?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe, his tie loosened after a long day. "Better than expected," Sarah replied, showing him the tablet with Eleanor's latest readings. Her response to the new medication has been positive. The arrhythmia episodes have decreased by 30%. Alexander studied the data, a small crease appearing between his brows. "That's significant improvement." "It is. Your mother is remarkably resilient." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly for perhaps the first time since she'd arrived. "She likes you, says you don't coddle her or treat her like she's made of glass." "She doesn't need coddling," Sarah replied with a small smile. "She needs respect and appropriate care." Something shifted in his expression. Approval, perhaps. Most healthcare professionals I've encountered tend to patronize the elderly. It's refreshing to see a different approach. "I was raised by my grandmother until I was 12, Sarah explained. "She never tolerated being talked down to, even when she was sick." "And after 12? He asked, surprising her with the personal question. "My mother took over when my grandmother passed away. It's just been the two of us since then." Alexander nodded, as if filing away this information. "Your dedication to your profession is evident. The overnight monitoring data shows you checking on her at 2 and 4 a.m. "Just being thorough," Sarah said, feeling oddly defensive. "It wasn't a criticism, Ms. Mitchell." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. "Thoroughness is a quality I value." Before she could respond, Mrs. Reynolds appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Blackwood, your conference call with Tokyo is in 5 minutes." "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds." He straightened, transforming back into the impeccable CEO. "Keep me updated on any changes, Ms. Mitchell." "Of course, Mr. Blackwood." As he walked away, Sarah realized it was the longest conversation they'd had since her arrival. The following week brought a string of rainy days that kept Eleanor indoors. To combat the elderly woman's restlessness, Sarah suggested they sort through old photo albums, an activity that would allow Eleanor to remain seated while staying mentally engaged. "What a marvelous idea," Eleanor exclaimed, directing Sarah to a cabinet in the library. "The family albums are in there on the bottom shelf." Sarah retrieved several leather-bound volumes and brought them to the sitting room where Eleanor waited. Together, they began looking through decades of Blackwood family history. "Oh, look at Alexander here." Eleanor pointed to a photograph of a grinning boy of about 10, proudly holding up a sailboat trophy. "He was so carefree then, always laughing." Sarah studied the image, finding it difficult to reconcile this joyful child with the stern man who prowled the halls of the mansion. "He looks happy." He was. "William, my husband, taught him to sail when he was just 5. Alexander took to it immediately, had a natural feel for the wind and water." Eleanor turned the page to reveal more sailing photographs. "He still keeps a boat at Marblehead, but I don't think he's used it since." She trailed off, but Sarah understood the unspoken end to that sentence, "since he lost his family." They continued through the albums, reaching more recent photos. Eleanor paused on a page showing Alexander with a beautiful dark-haired woman and a tiny girl with his striking blue eyes. "Rebecca and Emily," Eleanor said softly. "This was taken at Martha's Vineyard the summer before the accident." Sarah's heart tightened at the sight of Alexander with his arm around his wife, his face relaxed and open in a way she had never witnessed. The little girl sat on his shoulders, her small hands tangled in his dark hair, both of them laughing in the golden light of sunset. "They were beautiful," Sarah said gently. "They were his world," Eleanor replied, her finger tracing the outline of her granddaughter's face. Rebecca was brilliant, a pediatric surgeon. They met when Alexander was developing medical devices for children's hospitals. She smiled sadly. They challenged each other, pushed each other to be better. It was a true partnership. Sarah thought of the controlled, isolated man who now ran Blackwood Medical. It's hard to imagine losing so much at once. After the accident, He shut down completely, threw himself into work, expanded the company internationally, doubled. Our charitable foundation's endowment, anything to stay busy, to outrun the grief. Eleanor closed the album with a sigh. I worry he'll never allow himself to be vulnerable again. The sound of the front door closing interrupted their conversation. A moment later, Alexander appeared in the doorway, his hair damp from the rain. His gaze immediately fell on the photo album spread across the table, and something dark flashed across his features. I see you've been exploring family history, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah suggested it as a way to pass the time during the rain, Eleanor explained. It's been lovely revisiting old memories. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm sure it has. He turned to Sarah, his expression closed once more. Miss Mitchell, may I speak with you in my study, please? The request sounded more like a command. Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Eleanor, who gave her an encouraging nod. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. She followed him down the hallway to his study, a masculine space of leather and mahogany that smelled of old books and the faint trace of expensive cologne. Alexander closed the door behind them and moved to stand behind his desk, as if requiring the barrier between them. Miss Mitchell, I understand my mother enjoys your company, but I must ask you to respect certain boundaries. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm sorry if I overstepped. My past is not part of your duties here, he continued, cutting her off. Your role is to monitor my mother's health, not to encourage her to dwell on painful memories. The unfairness of his accusation stung. With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, your mother wanted to share those albums with me. Engaging with meaningful memories is beneficial for her emotional well-being, which directly impacts her physical health. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, as if surprised by her pushback. You're here to manage her medical condition, not play therapist. I'm here to provide comprehensive care, Sarah countered, surprising herself with her boldness. That includes understanding the family dynamics that affect her daily life and stress levels. Medicine isn't just about monitoring heart rates and administering medications. For a moment, he simply stared at her, and Sarah wondered if she'd just talked herself out of a job. Then, unexpectedly, something in his posture relaxed. You're right, he conceded, the admission clearly costing him. I apologize for my emo reaction. The albums caught me off guard. The sudden vulnerability in his expression made Sarah's irritation fade. I understand. I didn't mean to intrude on painful territory. Alexander moved to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked garden. My mother hasn't brought those albums out in years. She must trust you a great deal already. She's a remarkable woman, Sarah said. You're fortunate to have each other. He turned back to her, his expression softened by something like gratitude. Yes, I am. And she's fortunate to have your care, Miss Mitchell. A moment of understanding passed between them, brief but genuine. Then, as if remembering himself, Alexander straightened and returned to his professional demeanor. That will be all for now. Thank you for your dedication to my mother's care. Sarah nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. And Miss Mitchell? Sarah. She looked back, surprised by his use of her first name. You can call me Alexander. Mr. Blackwood makes me feel like my father. It wasn't quite a smile that accompanied the words, but there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a tiny crack in the armor he wore so rigidly. Good night, Alexander, she replied, testing the name on her tongue. Good night, Sarah. As she closed the study door behind her, Sarah couldn't help but feel that something significant had shifted between them. The man behind the CEO facade was beginning to emerge, complex and wounded, but perhaps not as unreachable as she had initially thought. What she didn't yet understand was how deeply her presence was already affecting the carefully constructed walls he had built around his heart, or how quickly those walls would be tested in the days to come. A month into Sarah's employment at the Blackwood estate, Boston was embracing autumn with brilliant foliage and crisp air. The gardens transformed into a canvas of red and gold, visible from the large windows of Eleanor's sitting room, where Sarah now conducted their morning health check. Your heart rate is perfectly stable today, Sarah reported, reviewing the data on her tablet. The new medication is working even better than expected. Eleanor smiled, adjusting the cashmere shawl around her shoulders. I certainly feel stronger. Strong enough for the charity gala this weekend, I should think. Sarah looked up in surprise. A gala? Are you sure that's wise? The Blackwood Foundation's annual fundraiser is our most important event of the year, Eleanor explained. I haven't missed one in 40 years, and I don't intend to start now. What does Alexander think about this? Sarah asked, already anticipating his objection. My son will protest, of course, Eleanor waved dismissively, but I'm determined, and I want you there as well, professionally speaking, to monitor my condition. Me? At a gala? Sarah's mind immediately went to her wardrobe, which consisted primarily of scrubs and casual clothes. I wouldn't have anything appropriate to wear. That's easily remedied, Eleanor replied with a mischievous glint in her eye. In fact, I've taken the liberty of arranging something. Consider it a thank you for all you've done. Before Sarah could protest further, Mrs. Reynolds appeared with a garment bag. The items you requested, Mrs. Blackwood. Perfect timing. Sarah, dear, consider this part of your professional equipment for the evening. Mrs. Reynolds laid the bag across the sofa and unzipped it to reveal an elegant emerald green gown with a modest neckline and flowing skirt. Beside it lay a pair of silver heels and a simple clutch. Eleanor, I can't accept this, Sarah began, even as her fingers reached out to touch the luxurious fabric. You can and you will, Eleanor insisted. The foundation supports medical education for underprivileged students. Your presence is entirely appropriate, both as my nurse and as someone who has benefited from similar programs. Sarah hesitated, torn between professional boundaries and the undeniable allure of the beautiful dress. I should at least check with Alexander first. I've already informed him you'll be accompanying me, Eleanor said, with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting her way. He agrees it's sensible to have you nearby given my condition. Later that afternoon, Sarah was reviewing patient data in the small office adjacent to Eleanor's suite when Alexander appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. My mother tells me you'll be attending the gala this weekend, he said without preamble. Sarah looked up, suddenly feeling defensive, only in a professional capacity, to monitor her health. I understand. He studied her for a moment. Have you attended many such events? None, actually, Sarah admitted. I'm more familiar with hospital charity bake sales than black tie galas. Something like amusement flickered across his face. It's fairly straightforward. Smile, make small talk, avoid the journalists, and don't mention politics or religion. Sounds simple enough, Sarah replied, relaxing slightly at his apparent acceptance of her attendance. The foundation means a great deal to my mother, Alexander continued, his tone softening. After my father died, she channeled her grief into expanding its reach. We now fund medical scholarships for hundreds of students each year. That's remarkable, Sarah said sincerely. Those scholarships change lives. I know because mine was similar, until it was rescinded, of course. Alexander's brow furrowed. Is that what happened with Northwestern? Sarah nodded, surprised he remembered that detail from their first meeting. Budget cuts, apparently. The timing couldn't have been worse. He seemed to consider this information before changing the subject. The gala begins at 7. A car will be available for you and my mother. I'll meet you there. I have meetings until late afternoon. We'll be ready, Sarah assured him. As he turned to leave, he paused. The emerald dress was a good choice. It will complement your eyes. Before Sarah could respond to the unexpected compliment, he was gone, leaving her with a curious flutter in her chest that she quickly attributed to nerves about the upcoming event. Saturday evening arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze, perfect weather for the outdoor portion of the gala, which would be held in the sculpture garden of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Sarah helped Eleanor prepare, monitoring her vital signs discreetly, as the older woman was attended to by her longtime hairstylist. Remember, dear, Eleanor advised as they settled into the back of the Blackwoods Bentley, most of these people are more concerned with how they appear than with judging you. Just be your authentic self. It's refreshingly rare in these circles. The museum was transformed for the evening, with twinkling lights strung through the trees and white-clothed tables positioned around the central fountain. A string quartet played near the entrance, where staff in formal attire greeted guests and directed them toward champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Sarah felt distinctly out of place, despite the beautiful dress, which fit as if it had been made for her. She stayed close to Eleanor, who moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting greetings and well-wishes with grace. "Eleanor, you look marvelous," exclaimed a silver-haired man, kissing Eleanor's cheek. "We weren't sure you'd make it this year, given the health concerns." "Nothing could keep me away, Senator," Eleanor replied smoothly. "May I introduce Sarah Mitchell? She's a talented nurse who's been helping me recover." Sarah shook the senator's hand, trying to appear more confident than she felt. As the evening progressed, Eleanor introduced her to countless distinguished guests: doctors, philanthropists, politicians, all of whom seemed genuinely interested in her background and career. "You're handling this like a natural," Eleanor commented as they paused near the fountain. "How are you feeling? Not too overwhelmed?" "It's a bit like being dropped into a foreign country," Sarah admitted, "but everyone's been surprisingly kind." "The Blackwood name opens doors," Eleanor said with a knowing smile. "Though I suspect your own charm is doing most of the work." Sarah was about to respond when the crowd near the entrance shifted and Alexander appeared. He cut an impressive figure in his tuxedo, tall and commanding. Several guests immediately gravitated toward him, but his eyes swept the garden until they found his mother and Sarah beside her. He made his way toward them, stopping occasionally to exchange brief greetings with important guests. When he finally reached them, he kissed his mother's cheek and turned to Sarah. "You both look lovely," he said, his gaze lingering on Sarah for a moment longer than strictly necessary. "How are you feeling, Mother?" "Marvelous," Eleanor replied. "Sarah has been monitoring me discreetly all evening. My heart is behaving perfectly." "Excellent," Alexander offered his arm to his mother. "They're about to announce dinner. Shall we?" As they moved toward the museum's grand hall, where dinner would be served, Sarah felt a light touch on her arm. She turned to find a woman in her 50s with an expensive camera around her neck. "You must be Sarah Mitchell," the woman said with a practiced smile. "I'm Diana Winters from Boston Society Pages. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? We're doing a feature on the Blackwood Foundation's work." Before Sarah could respond, Alexander materialized at her side. "Ms. Winters," he acknowledged coolly. "I'm afraid Ms. Mitchell is here in a professional capacity and won't be giving interviews." "Of course, Alexander," Diana replied, undeterred. "But surely a quick photo of the three of you wouldn't hurt. The mysterious new addition to the Blackwood household has sparked quite a bit of interest." Alexander's jaw tightened, but Eleanor intervened smoothly. "One photo, Diana, and then we really must join our table." The photographer quickly arranged them, Eleanor in the center with Alexander and Sarah on either side. Sarah smiled nervously, conscious of Alexander's arm barely brushing against hers as they posed. "Perfect," Diana declared after snapping several shots. "Thank you. Enjoy your evening." As they continued toward the dining hall, Sarah whispered to Alexander, "Mysterious new addition." "Ignore the gossip," he advised quietly. "The society pages thrive on speculation, especially about private families like ours." The dinner portion of the evening passed pleasantly, with Sarah seated between Eleanor and a charming neurosurgeon who regaled her with stories from his residency days. Alexander was positioned across the table, and several times Sarah glanced up to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. After dinner came the speeches and the Foundation's presentation. Alexander took the stage with confidence, outlining the organization's accomplishments over the past year and introducing several scholarship recipients who shared their stories. Sarah was moved by the genuine emotion in his voice when he spoke about providing opportunities to talented students who might otherwise never realize their potential. "He believes deeply in this work," Eleanor murmured to Sarah. "Education changed the trajectory of our family 3 generations ago. Alexander never forgets that." When the formal program concluded, the string quartet resumed playing, and couples began moving to the dance floor. Sarah helped Eleanor to a comfortable seating area near the garden, checking her pulse discreetly. "Stop fussing," Eleanor chided gently. "I'm fine, better than fine. This evening has been invigorating." "Your heart rate is elevated," Sarah pointed out. "We should consider leaving soon." "Not before you have at least one dance," Eleanor insisted. "You've been working all evening. Take a few minutes to enjoy yourself." Before Sarah could protest, Alexander approached their table. "Mother, Dr. Landon would like to speak with you about his new cardiac research." "Ah, yes. Sarah, would you mind if I abandoned you for a few minutes? Robert's work is fascinating but rather technical. I'd appreciate your perspective." Sarah had no choice but to agree, following Eleanor and Alexander to where an elderly doctor waited eagerly. The conversation quickly delved into experimental treatments that genuinely captured Sarah's interest. She asked several insightful questions that seemed to impress both Dr. Landon and Alexander. "Your nurse has a remarkable grasp of emerging treatments," Dr. Landon commented to Eleanor. "Have you considered pursuing advanced research, Ms. Mitchell?" "It's been a dream," Sarah admitted, "but circumstances haven't aligned yet." "They might sooner than you think," Eleanor said cryptically. "Robert, would you mind escorting me to meet the Hendersons?" I promised Charlotte I'd congratulate her on her daughter's medical school acceptance. As Eleanor and Dr. Landon moved away, Sarah suddenly realized she'd been neatly maneuvered into being alone with Alexander. He seemed to realize it too, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "My mother has never been subtle," he remarked. "Would you care to dance, Sarah? Or would that violate some professional boundary?" The question held no judgment, only genuine inquiry. Sarah hesitated only briefly before answering, "One dance seems harmless enough." He led her to the edge of the dance floor, where other couples moved gracefully to the music. His hand settled lightly at her waist, the other taking hers with unexpected gentleness. Sarah was grateful for the dancing lessons her mother had insisted on during high school, as she matched his steps with reasonable competence. "You seem surprised," Alexander observed after a moment. "By what?" "By all of this," he said, executing a perfect turn. "The foundation, perhaps, or the fact that I don't actually have two left feet." Sarah smiled, despite herself. "I'm adjusting my preconceptions. It's a night for revelations." Such as discovering that Boston's most intimidating CEO secretly has a heart after all, she replied, immediately wondering if she'd overstepped. But Alexander didn't seem offended. Instead, his mouth curved into what might almost be called a smile. "Don't spread that rumor. It would ruin my reputation." For a brief moment, as they moved together under the twinkling lights, Sarah caught a glimpse of the man Eleanor had described, the one who existed before tragedy had reshaped him. Then the music ended, and reality reasserted itself. "Thank you for the dance," Sarah said, stepping back slightly. "The pleasure was mine," he replied formally, though something in his eyes remained warm. "We should check on my mother." They found Eleanor holding court among a group of longtime friends, looking tired but happy. After confirming that her vital signs remained stable, Sarah agreed it was time to return to the estate. Alexander arranged for the car to take them home, while he remained to conclude some foundation business. "It was a wonderful evening," Eleanor declared as they settled into the back seat. "And you, my dear, were a complete success." "Hardly," Sarah demurred. "But I enjoyed it more than I expected." "Alexander certainly seemed to enjoy your company," Eleanor observed with thinly veiled satisfaction. "I haven't seen him dance in years." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. He was being polite. "My son is many things, but he is never merely polite. When Alexander does something, it's because he wants to." Eleanor patted Sarah's hand. "The society papers will have a field day, of course." "What do you mean?" "Diana Winters never misses an opportunity for a good story. Mysterious nurse captures elusive bachelor's attention, or some such nonsense." Sarah frowned. "That's ridiculous. I'm just doing my job." "Of course you are," Eleanor agreed, though her tone suggested she believed otherwise. "But perception often overshadows reality, especially in our circles." The following morning, Sarah was enjoying her day off by reading in the garden when Mrs. Reynolds appeared with a strained expression. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in his study immediately." Something in the housekeeper's tone sent a chill through Sarah. She marked her place in her book and made her way to Alexander's study, wondering what could have prompted such an urgent summons. She found him standing by the window, his back rigid with tension. On his desk lay a tablet displaying what appeared to be a society page from an online publication. The headline made her blood run cold. "Blackwood heirs new love interest, gold digger or genuine article." Below it was a photo from last night, not the formal one with Eleanor, but a candid shot of Sarah and Alexander dancing, looking at each other with what the caption described as undeniable chemistry. Beside it was another photo that made Sarah gasp in shock, her and her brother Michael embracing after his college graduation last year, the image cropped to make it appear romantic rather than familial. "Care to explain?" Alexander asked, his voice cold as he turned to face her. "Explain what?" Sarah replied, genuine confusion mingling with growing anger. "That Diana Winters is manufacturing a story where none exists?" "I'm referring to the man in the second photo," he clarified, his expression hardening. "The one you're apparently involved with." Understanding dawned, bringing with it a wave of indignation. "That's my brother Michael at his graduation. We're not involved, we're siblings." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Your personnel file doesn't mention any siblings. Because my medical history and emergency contacts were the only family information requested," Sarah countered, struggling to keep her voice level. "Michael is my half-brother, different fathers. He's studying engineering at MIT. Alexander studied her face intently, searching for deception. Sarah met his gaze unflinchingly, too outraged to be intimidated. "You could have verified that with a simple question instead of assuming the worst," she added, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. "Is that really what you think of me? That I'm some kind of gold digger targeting your family while secretly involved with someone else?" Something shifted in Alexander's expression, doubt giving way to realization, then to what might have been shame. He moved to his desk and tapped the tablet, pulling up another screen. "Our security team ran a background check when you were hired," he said, his tone less accusatory now. "It didn't show any siblings. Michael was adopted by his father when he was 3 after my mother remarried," Sarah explained, still bristling. "His legal name is Michael Conway, not Mitchell. But he's still my brother in every way that matters." Alexander was silent for a long moment, weighing her words. Finally, he said quietly, "I apologize for jumping to conclusions." The apology, though clearly difficult for him to offer, did little to soothe Sarah's wounded pride. "Is that why you hired me? Because your background check convinced you I had no attachments, no life outside nursing that might interfere with caring for your mother?" His silence was answer enough. "I see." Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I care deeply about Eleanor's well-being, and I've done my job with complete professionalism, but I won't stay where I'm not trusted. Sarah, I'll pack my things and be gone by this evening." She turned to leave, dignity intact despite the ache spreading through her chest. At the door, she paused. "For the record, Mr. Blackwood, not everyone has an ulterior motive. Some of us are exactly what we appear to be." With those words, she left, closing the door firmly behind her. She made it halfway down the hallway before the tears began to fall. Not for the job she was leaving, but for the possibility of something she hadn't even realized she'd begun to hope for until it was shattered by mistrust. In his study, Alexander Blackwood stood motionless, staring at the closed door. The familiar walls he'd built around himself after losing Rebecca and Emily had protected him from further pain, but they had also blinded him to the truth standing right before him. Now, for the first time in years, he felt those walls crumbling. Too late to prevent him from making what might be the greatest mistake since he'd lost his family. Across the estate, unaware of the confrontation taking place, Eleanor Blackwood sat in her sitting room, reviewing the society pages with a thoughtful expression. Unlike her son, she saw the manipulated photos for what they were, a desperate attempt to create scandal where none existed. But she also saw something else in those images, the possibility of healing for her beloved son, if only he could overcome the fear that had governed his life for too long. With a determined sigh, she reached for her phone. It was time for a mother's intervention before two stubborn hearts made a mistake that neither could afford. Sarah folded her scrubs with mechanical precision, placing them in her suitcase alongside the few personal items she'd brought to the Blackwood estate. The emerald dress hung in the closet, a reminder of brief happiness now tainted by mistrust. She left it there. She wanted nothing from the Blackwoods except her dignity. A soft knock interrupted her packing. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Reynolds with departure arrangements. Instead, Eleanor entered, leaning on her cane more heavily than usual. "So it's true you're leaving us?" Sarah turned, composing herself. "I think it's for the best." "Because my son jumped to conclusions." Eleanor moved to the armchair by the window, settling into it with a weary sigh. "Please sit with me for a moment." Sarah hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. "I can't work for someone who doesn't trust me." "Alexander's trust issues run deeper than you know," Eleanor said, her voice gentle. "When Rebecca died, she wasn't alone in that car." Sarah's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "There was a man with her, her art instructor. For months, Alexander suspected they were having an affair. Rebecca denied it, of course, and Alexander wanted desperately to believe her." Eleanor's eyes grew distant with painful memories. "The accident happened after they'd had lunch together. The investigation revealed nothing improper, but Alexander has never forgiven himself for doubting her, for the argument they had that morning, their last conversation." "That's terrible," Sarah murmured, her anger softening slightly. "But it doesn't excuse what happened today." "No, it doesn't," Eleanor agreed, "but perhaps it explains it. When those photos appeared, all his old fears resurfaced." She leaned forward, taking Sarah's hand. "He's already realized his mistake. Alexander doesn't apologize easily. The fact that he did speaks volumes." "It's not enough," Sarah said, though with less conviction than before. "Then what would be?" Eleanor asked simply. The question hung in the air, unanswered. What would be enough? Sarah wasn't sure herself. The hurt went deeper than professional pride. It had reached the part of her that, despite her best efforts, had begun to care for the complicated man behind the CEO facade. "I need to go," Sarah said finally. "At least for now." Eleanor nodded, accepting defeat. "Will you at least say goodbye to him properly? He's in the garden pavilion. That's where he always goes when he's troubled." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She owed Eleanor that much. The garden pavilion stood at the far end of the estate grounds, a glass and cedar structure overlooking a small pond. Sarah found Alexander standing at the railing, his back to the entrance, shoulders rigid with tension. "Your mother said I'd find you here," she announced her presence quietly. He turned, his expression revealing genuine surprise and something like hope. "I didn't expect you to come." "I'm leaving," Sarah stated simply, "but I wanted to say goodbye properly for Eleanor's sake." Alexander moved toward her, stopping at a respectful distance. "I've arranged for you to receive 6 months' salary as severance. It's the least I can do." "I don't want your money," Sarah replied sharply. "I never did." "I know that now." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "The foundation has a scholarship program with Northwestern. One phone call, and your place in that specialized program would be secured, fully funded." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with renewed anger. "So you're trying to buy my forgiveness now? Or just ease your conscience?" "Neither," Alexander replied, his voice low and intense. "I'm trying to give you what you deserve. What you earned long before you met any of us. Your talent shouldn't be wasted because of budget cuts or my mistakes." The sincerity in his voice gave Sarah pause. She studied his face, seeing real regret etched in its tense lines. "Why did you react that way?" she asked finally. "What did you think was happening?" Alexander turned back toward the pond, silent for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was rough with emotion. I thought I was repeating old patterns, seeing things that weren't there, believing things were too good to be true. He glanced at her. You reminded me what it felt like to hope again, and that terrified me. Hope for what? Sarah pressed, her heart beating faster despite her resolve to remain detached. For connection. For something beyond the shell of a life I've built since losing them. He faced her fully now, vulnerability evident in his eyes. Do you know what my mother said to me after you left my study? She said, Alexander, you're so afraid of losing someone again that you're pushing away the first person who might help you truly live. Sarah's carefully maintained composure began to crumble. She shouldn't have said that. She was right. Alexander took a step closer. I've spent 5 years existing, not living, until you arrived with your directness, your integrity, your refusal to be intimidated by me or impressed by my wealth. Stop, Sarah whispered, tears threatening. This isn't fair. None of this has been fair, he agreed. Not to you, certainly. I reacted from old wounds and old fears when I should have trusted my instincts about who you really are. He reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone, pulling up an image before offering it to her. Sarah looked down to see a photograph of Michael in his MIT engineering lab, clearly recent. I had my security team verify everything, Alexander explained. Michael Conway, 22, graduate engineering student, specializing in medical device innovation. Your half-brother, as you said. I should have asked you directly instead of assuming the worst. Yes, you should have, Sarah agreed, returning the phone. Alexander nodded, accepting the rebuke. I understand why you need to leave, but I'm asking you to reconsider, not because of my mother's health, which has improved significantly under your care, but because I believe you belong here, with us. His voice softened. With me, if that's something you might eventually want. The naked honesty in his voice stripped away Sarah's defenses. Still, she hesitated, caught between the pull of her heart and the warnings of her mind. I need time, she said finally. I can't make this decision now with everything so raw. Of course, he agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. The position remains yours regardless of your decision about other matters. Sarah nodded, grateful for his understanding. I'll go to my mother's for a few days, to think. May I call you? He asked, the question revealing more vulnerability than any grand gesture could have. Yes, she replied softly. You may. 3 days later, Sarah sat in her mother's small kitchen in Dorchester, nursing a cup of tea while her mother prepared dinner. She'd explained everything. The misunderstanding, Alexander's apology, her confusion about what to do next. He sounds like a man who's been deeply hurt, her mother observed, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. Not that it excuses his behavior, but it does explain it. Oh, that's almost exactly what Eleanor said, Sarah noted with a small smile. Smart woman, her mother nodded approvingly. And what does your heart tell you, Sarah, beyond the hurt pride and the justified anger? Sarah traced the rim of her mug thoughtfully. That there's something worth exploring there, something real beneath all his defenses. Then perhaps her mother began, only to be interrupted by the doorbell. Sarah rose to answer it, expecting Michael, who had promised to visit. Instead, she found Alexander Blackwood standing on the modest porch of her childhood home, looking simultaneously out of place in his tailored suit and strangely right. Alexander, she breathed in surprise. What are you doing here? I know you asked for time, he said quickly, and I'll honor that. But there's something I needed to show you first, something that couldn't wait. He gestured toward the street where a familiar figure was emerging from a town car. Michael, looking confused but intrigued. You brought my brother here? Sarah asked, bewildered. Not exactly, Alexander replied. I've been pursuing an acquisition for Blackwood Medical, a small startup developing revolutionary cardiac monitoring technology. The lead engineer is quite brilliant. Michael approached, grinning as he climbed the steps. Surprise, sis. I was going to tell you tonight anyway, but Mr. Blackwood thought this would be more dramatic. Tell me what? Sarah looked between them, comprehension dawning slowly. Blackwood Medical is acquiring my team's technology, Michael explained excitedly. We've been working on non-invasive arrhythmia monitoring for 2 years. It's exactly what Mrs. Blackwood needs, and thousands of other patients. You knew? Sarah turned to Alexander, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. Not until yesterday, he assured her. I'd been reviewing acquisition targets for weeks. When I saw Conway Medical Systems on the list, I nearly dismissed it because of the name coincidence. Then I looked at the team photo. He showed her his tablet where a group of young engineers posed in a lab. Front and center stood Michael, grinning proudly. The technology is genuinely groundbreaking, Alexander continued. The acquisition makes perfect business sense, but I won't deny that the connection to you made me prioritize the deal. So that's why you're here? To tell me you're acquiring my brother's company? Sarah asked, still processing the coincidence. Partly, Alexander admitted, but mostly I'm here because I realized something important. The night of the gala, when we danced, I felt alive again for the first time in years, and these past 3 days without you at the estate have shown me just how much I've come to depend on your presence, not as my mother's nurse, but as the person who challenges me, who sees past my defenses. Michael cleared his throat awkwardly. I think I'll go say hi to Mom, he said, slipping past them into the house. Alone on the porch, Sarah and Alexander faced each other, the autumn sunset painting everything in golden light. I understand. If you need more time, Alexander said softly, but I wanted you to know that I'm willing to wait, to earn back your trust slowly, if that's what it takes. Sarah studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the confident exterior. Why, me, you could have anyone. Because you're real, he replied simply. You cared for my mother without agenda. You challenged me when everyone else walks on eggshells. You made me remember what it feels like to connect with someone without fear. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm, but Alexander shook his head quickly. It's not what you think, he assured her, opening the box to reveal a simple silver key. This is to the boathouse at Marblehead. I haven't been sailing since I lost Rebecca and Emily. I'd like to take you there this weekend if you're willing. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to start fresh, away from the mansion and its shadows. The gesture, so personal, so meaningful, touched Sarah deeply. This wasn't a grand, expensive gesture meant to impress, but an invitation to share something he had locked away with his grief. I'd like that, she said softly. Alexander's relief was palpable. Does this mean you'll return to the estate? I'll continue caring for Eleanor, Sarah confirmed. As for the rest, let's take it one sail at a time. The smile that transformed Alexander's face made him look years younger, revealing the man who had been buried beneath grief and guardedness for too long. I can work with that. 3 months later, the Blackwood estate was decorated for Christmas. Evergreen garlands and twinkling lights transforming the mansion into a winter wonderland. In the grand drawing room, Eleanor sat regally beside the 15-foot tree, supervising, as Sarah and Alexander hung the family's heirloom ornaments. A little higher. Dear, Eleanor directed as Sarah placed a delicate glass angel. That one was always William's favorite. Sarah adjusted the ornament, smiling as Alexander steadied the ladder beneath her. Their relationship had evolved with deliberate slowness. Sailing, expeditions followed by quiet dinners, long conversations that gradually revealed their hearts to each other. The walls around Alexander's heart hadn't come down all at once, but brick by brick, revealing the compassionate, complex man beneath. Eleanor's health had stabilized significantly under their combined care. Blackwood Medical's acquisition of Michael's cardiac monitoring technology had proven both a business success and a medical breakthrough, with Eleanor as the first patient to benefit from the new system. I think we need more lights on the left side, Alexander observed, stepping back to assess the tree. Always the perfectionist, Eleanor chided fondly. The tree is beautiful. Now, Sarah, would you help me to my room? I'd like to rest before dinner. As Sarah assisted Eleanor upstairs, the older woman patted her hand affectionately. You've brought life back to this house, my dear, and to my son. He's done the same for me, Sarah admitted. I never expected any of this when I helped you at the airport that day. The best things in life are rarely planned, Eleanor replied, with a knowing smile. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even when we think we're headed somewhere else entirely. Later that evening, after Eleanor had retired, Sarah found Alexander in his study, reviewing foundation documents. She paused in the doorway, taking a moment to simply watch him, his brow furrowed in concentration, his presence no longer intimidating but comforting in its familiarity. "Staring is impolite, Miss Mitchell," he said without looking up, though a smile played at his lips. "I was admiring the view, Mr. Blackwood," she countered, entering the room. He set aside his work, giving her his full attention, something that had become his habit in recent months. "I have something for you." From his desk drawer, he withdrew an envelope and handed it to her. Inside, Sarah found an acceptance letter from Northwestern University's Advanced Nursing Program, with a twist. "A satellite program here in Boston?" she asked, scanning the details in amazement. "The foundation has been working with Northwestern to establish an East Coast campus for their specialized medical programs," Alexander explained. "The first classes begin next fall. You've been accepted, with a full scholarship, based entirely on your qualifications," he added hastily. "I recused myself from the selection committee." Sarah was momentarily speechless. This wasn't just an opportunity for her, but for countless other students who couldn't relocate to Chicago. "This is incredible," she managed finally. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "I can think of other ways you might express your gratitude," Alexander suggested, his eyes warm with affection as he drew her into his arms. Their kiss was tender, a promise, of deeper connection that had grown naturally over the months since their confrontation and reconciliation. When they separated, Alexander kept her close, his expression turning serious. "There's something else I need to tell you. I visited Rebecca and Emily's graves yesterday for the first time in over a year." Sarah listened quietly, understanding the significance of this milestone. "I talked to them," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I told them about you, about how you've helped me remember that life is for the living. I think they would have liked you." Sarah touched his face gently. "I wish I could have known them." "In a way, you do," he replied. "Every time I share a memory of them without feeling like I'm drowning in grief, that's because of you. You've helped me find a way to honor their memory without being imprisoned by it." He led her to the sofa by the fireplace, sitting beside her with an air of nervous determination. "The foundation gala is next month." "I know," Sarah nodded. "Eleanor's already planning her outfit." "Last year you attended as my mother's nurse," Alexander said, taking her hand. "This year, I was hoping you might attend as my partner." The word hung in the air between them, not girlfriend or date, but partner, equal chosen. "I'd be honored," Sarah replied, her heart full. "There's one more thing." Alexander reached into his pocket again, this time withdrawing a small, worn, velvet ring box that looked much older than the one that had held the boathouse key. "This belonged to my grandmother. My mother gave it to me yesterday." He opened it to reveal a vintage emerald ring surrounded by small diamonds. "She said it matches your eyes and the dress you wore to your first gala." Sarah's breath caught as Alexander slid from the sofa to one knee before her. "I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet," he clarified, his voice steady but vulnerable. "That would be rushing things, and we've been careful not to do that. But I am asking you to accept this as a promise that when the time is right, if you'll have me, I want to build a life with you." Sarah looked from the ring to the man kneeling before her, this complex, wounded, remarkable man who had found the courage to open his heart again, despite his fears. In his eyes, she saw not the intimidating CEO or the grieving widower, but simply Alexander, the man she had come to love. "Yes," she said simply, extending her hand. "It's a promise." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, Sarah marveled at how a chance encounter at an airport had led her here to this moment of unexpected joy. "I love you, Sarah Mitchell," Alexander said, the words clearly new on his tongue but no less sincere for it. "And I love you, Alexander Blackwood," she replied, drawing him up to sit beside her. "Even when you're being impossible." His laugh was free and genuine, the laugh of the boy in the sailing photographs now found again in the man before her. "I can live with that." As they sat together in the firelight, Sarah thought of all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment, the scholarship that fell through, the chance meeting with Eleanor, the misunderstanding that nearly drove them apart. None of it had been part of her careful plan, yet all of it had led her to something far better than she could have imagined. 1 year later, the Blackwood Foundation Gala was held at the same museum, but with one significant addition, a special announcement of the new Blackwood Mitchell Scholarship for Nursing Excellence, dedicated to providing opportunities for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Sarah stood proudly beside Alexander as he unveiled the program, her emerald ring catching the light as she applauded. Eleanor watched from her seat of honor, her health stable thanks to the monitoring technology developed by Michael's team, now fully integrated into Blackwood Medical's suite of innovations. Beside her sat Sarah's mother, the two women having formed their own unlikely friendship over the past year. After the formal announcements, Alexander led Sarah to the dance floor just as he had at that first gala. This time there was no hesitation, no careful distance between them, only the easy intimacy of two people who had found their way to each other despite all odds. "Happy?" he asked softly as they moved together beneath the twinkling lights. "Beyond words," Sarah replied, resting her head briefly on his shoulder, "though I'm still getting used to having my name on a scholarship program." "Get used to seeing your name alongside mine," Alexander murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It's where it belongs." As the music played and they danced among the other couples, Sarah caught Eleanor's eye across the room. The older woman gave her a knowing smile and a slight nod, acknowledgement of the journey they had all taken together, from a chance encounter at an airport to this moment of quiet joy. In that simple gesture, Sarah saw the truth that had been revealed through all their struggles and misunderstandings. Sometimes, the heart's most profound healing comes not from running away from pain, but from finding the courage to open itself again, to trust, to risk, and ultimately, to love. The end. Dear listeners, we hope Sarah and Alexander's journey has touched your hearts. Their story reminds us that sometimes life's greatest gifts come from unexpected encounters, and that even the most guarded hearts can find healing through love. For more emotionally captivating stories like this one, we've curated a special playlist that explores the complexities of human relationships. You'll find it by clicking the link to your left. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day we bring you unique narratives that delve into the depths of human experience. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear which moments in Sarah and Alexander's story resonate.